I Hate Politics is a podcast about a human activity we love to hate. I am Sunil Dasgupta. When the Harvard political scientist Robert Putnam was lamenting the decline of social capital in America, he was not thinking about Montgomery County, Maryland, I believe. Because for as long as I have known Montgomery County, nearly 2 decades now, it has seemed to me densely packed with civic organizations which feed social trust. There are hundreds of HOAs and PTAs, of course. The county itself spends something like $600 million contracting with nonprofits for services for everything from food banks to mental health support. But it is the county's heart beating through countless volunteer grassroots political organizations that makes this jurisdiction different from others. I don't mean by that unique. Many counties and cities are similarly teeming with local political organizations, but rather I'm talking about the overwhelmingly progressive left political preferences that is backed by a willingness to organize, to act collectively, and to do so loudly and at some cost. You've all heard the criticism that Northern Virginia is better for business than Montgomery County, Maryland. When it comes to democratic politics, the tables turn, and Montgomery County is often the first choice over Northern Virginia counties. This is an interesting dichotomy, giving precedence to politics over economics, and goes to the central division within the Democratic Party between moderates and progressives. A few weeks ago, I got an email from Chris Pickett, the founder in 2016 of the Montgomery County chapter of the national democratic organization called Indivisible. By the time he wrote to me, he had passed the torch and recently published a book on local political organizing called The People United, a memoir of hope and resistance during Trump's first term. Link to the book on Amazon is in the show notes. Chris pitched the idea of an episode on the anti-Trump resistance in Montgomery County. I asked if we could broaden the idea to include political organizing more broadly. To me, there seemed to be tension between fighting Trump, which practically every Democrat in the county wants to do, and holding local leaders accountable, which means holding other Democrats accountable. The overwhelming Democratic advantage in the county means that political contestation has all but moved inside the party, and the primary elections are the main show. In November, the county will ratify its June choices. Chris agreed and brought along the current executive director of Indivisible Montgomery, D. Clarkin, for what became a wide-ranging discussion of grassroots political organizing in the county. Stay with us.
What's the matter? You seem so surprised, glancing in the morning paper tonight. Seems that the French can capitalize, not the execution of the spy. During General didn't die. Watch his family cry. Watch his family cry.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The 2 songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp. D. Clarkin, Chris Pickett, welcome to I Hit Politics.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Montgomery County, Maryland is densely packed with civil society groups. When you look out from your organizing perch, how do you see this vast, densely packed system of civil society?
I think it's useful to break it down into the various groups that exist currently. So Indivisible Montgomery was founded in response to the first election of Donald Trump. So that's a useful marker. There were groups around before Indivisible Montgomery came about. Those are your NAACP chapters, CASA, for example, Tacoma Park Mobilization, Moms Demand Action, those kinds of groups, those that were around before the formal resistance was actually a thing. Then there were the groups that formed in response to Trump's election. That's Indivisible Montgomery, Do the Most Good, and many other groups in the county that have since faded away. And then there are other groups that have formed subsequent to the first election, some in response to the second election.
Some of the groups have different focus. For example, there are some groups that work primarily on election work, campaigning and so forth. And then there are some groups that right now are focused on mutual aid, as we're seeing attacks on our immigrant communities. Anybody in Montgomery County who is interested in resistance work, what they can do is just go to indivisible.org and look at that map, and they will see groups all over Montgomery County. If they want to work with a local neighborhood group that is focused on standing out over an overpass bridge every Friday night, they can find that. Or they can find a larger group like Indivisible Montgomery that has a lot of different work. We put out about 6 calls to action every week to our members, like contacting your delegation in Annapolis when they're in session, to election work. It's a quilt. If one group doesn't work that well for you, you can find another group.
Yeah, the marketplace of resistance.
That's right.
Yeah. Some people want to only work with a small group of people they trust and feel comfortable with. And some people are happier tapping into a larger, our group has a fair amount of infrastructure, steering committee and newsletter and stuff. It's a little more, formalized, but yet there is other ways within our group to also be agile and work with a small team. Right now, we're setting up a protest against Citizens Bank on June 6th. And we have 3-4 people working on that right now. We put out a mobilized link.
None of this work is exclusive to any group. There's collaboration among groups, but also people belong to multiple groups in the area because different groups at different times are doing something that appeals to different people. And the overriding drive, at least when I was leading the group, was as long as people are engaged, I don't care if it's with us or with another group, just stay engaged and make your voice heard.
Now, with the federal layoffs, especially, around NIH, National Institutes of Health, have you seen an increase in the membership of groups and the arrival of yet new groups that cater to those interests?
There is a group that is focused solely on NIH. I think it was the group that spun out of the Bethesda Declaration. And it is a group that meets every week, every Saturday. It does a vigil by NIH. We have some members in Indivisible Montgomery who are also members of the NIH group. So there's lots of cross-pollination there. Our group, we have gained about 1,000 members. We're about 2,700 now.
We talked about this idea that there were multiple groups and you can choose whatever you want. There's this tension between let 1,000 flowers bloom, sorry to use Mao, and the fact that you really need to have a cohesive resistance movement that is big enough to have impact. How do you kind of balance between those two things?
If you look at the numbers of engagement through the No Kings events, they have grown larger every time. There were 8 million for No Kings 3, and that is larger than No Kings 2. That is talking nationwide. But the point is these disparate groups are banding together at these key points. I think where we may be building towards is a general strike. I think there is some strength in being so disparate, or that's not the right word I want.
Decentralized.
Yes, and Indivisible, the National Indivisible is very focused on that.
As far as, all the groups in the area, how do we not step on each other's toes? There's a lot of communication that goes on between groups. Some groups will have, as Dee indicated earlier, different focus levels. Some will just focus on the federal, some will focus on state, some will focus on very local politics. And so for the groups that only focus on federal, they can partner with those focusing on local to help their members get engaged at that level. But also there's a lot of communication about upcoming events. So one group will have some event like the Citizens Bank protests that Dee mentioned, or they notified all the other groups in the area of what's going on, because not only do you want other groups to not schedule something for that day.
Do you even know all the groups that exist? If there's a repository, there's already coordination.
The National Indivisible site does have a map where groups can go and register their group there for others.
And they don't have to be indivisible groups. It could be any group.
No, they can be any kind of resistance group.
There's a Maryland State Coalition of Indivisibles as well.
It seems to me that your groups are almost pre-movement, that it takes a No Kings or a Women's March or something large to come along to utilize that infrastructure that you have created. What seems interesting to me is that, especially in Montgomery, because so many of us are federally oriented, that we are moved by national issues much more than we are moved by localish things. And that may be changing, but that's been the experience that I've had over the over 10 years.
When I launched Indivisible Montgomery at the end of 2016, I did so because I didn't see any other groups in our area, and I wanted to lead something. There was so much energy at that time. In the early days, building the organization was making sure we had a presence on social media and a website, and just trying to let people know we exist. My wife and I went and hung up flyers around the county about our first meeting.
Okay, so where did you go?
Oh, we went to coffee shops, we went to libraries, we just hung up flyers anywhere we could. This being a very new movement, I had no idea where to go out and look for people. My wife took the opposite tack of, well, if it's brand new and there's no structure, then your members are everywhere. So just hang up flyers or advertise to people wherever people go. And that's what worked for us. We started off with 12 members on our newsletter, and then 3 weeks later, we had over 200 people as members of Indivisible Montgomery, and we grew exponentially every week for a few weeks because people were looking for something to do, some place to go to put their energies. And at the time, we were focused at the federal level, and that's what people wanted to do. And since then, keeping people engaged, keeping people around, still keeping people coming in, that's a different question than what was happening, as you were saying, in these pre-movement days, or at least at the very beginning of the movement. It was really just capturing everyone who was interested and eager to do something, and then directing that energy into a positive way that kept them coming back week after week.
In your views, are local issues as energizing as national ones, or is it primarily national issues?
It depends in part on who the leader is. At the time when I led the group, I was more interested in national issues, and so that's where I had the group looking, and that's what motivated me. I also have an anecdote in my book where I came across Marisol Morales at a local coffee shop, who at the time represented my district in the Maryland legislature. I had absolutely no idea who she was, and I embarrassed myself and introduced myself to her. But that's just because of how I was focused. But as I grew as a leader in this organization, my field expanded and I became much more interested in state and local politics as time went on.
Is that the evolutionary trajectory?
In some respects, yes, because we have the recognition that there's no point in trying to lobby the federal level for progressive change right now. So what we want to do is focus on a group or body of legislatures that we can influence who potentially would be amenable to progressive action, and that's the Maryland General Assembly. So yes, we have had multiple calls to action for our members during the session. We work pretty closely with the Maryland chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Safety. And most of our efforts on the federal level are all resistance efforts, as opposed to obstructing and resisting at the federal.
This brings up also another tension, that groups need success to want to continue.
Yep.
And the focus of a group has to be a balance between some opportunities to succeed and other opportunity to be obstructive or resistant. How do you balance that?
Anybody who has come out to a large protest, whether it's be a No Kings protest or May 1, they feel, I think they feel successful because there's a tremendous amount of positive energy that is, present at those events. We have a group that stands out every Friday evening in Silver Spring. It's at the corner of 16th Street and 2nd Avenue. We've noticed that the people going by every Friday night are getting more and more strong in their response to us with the thumbs up and the honking. And sometimes we walk away from that and your ears are ringing, So that is a form of success that we can have and that we feel good about. I put in our newsletter every week what I call bright spots, where I've captured something good that has happened this week, either locally or nationally, and we highlight that. So, for example, just this week, we highlighted the fact that Abigail Spanberger approved a package of health bills in Virginia, capping the cost of a weekly dose of insulin at $35. Our members worked very hard on the Virginia state elections last year. We even fundraised for the state house races. So we can draw a direct line between our work last year to positive change in our sister state.
Interesting. Do you fundraise in the Maryland State House?
We do not fundraise per se ourselves, but we push our members to go to the States Project. Daniel Squadron's outfit that is one of the biggest funders of state races around the country. In fact, I want to say in 2025, they bested the DCCC.
Is the nature of politics, if you have too many Democrats, or I assume, on the Republican side, it's the same thing in Texas or Florida. If the only competition is within a party, then everybody checks out.
But I would argue right now, there is very strong competition within the Democratic Party, progressive versus what we would call corporate Dems.
Right. So are these civil society groups organized around those ideas? And are they then coming out in support of different candidates or
Yes.
Electoral strategies? Can you speak to that?
This is the very first year that Indivisible National will get involved with Democratic primaries. And it is right along that axis of that we're not winning with corporate Dems. We're winning with progressives. And we are a progressive movement. So we should support those progressive candidates. Very locally, I'll just put you into news, hot flash news from our little Indivisible Montgomery here, is that we're going to put out a call to action to our members next week to either donate or do phone banking for Captain Bobby in Bill Ferguson's district. We are not happy with Ferguson, and I'm not talking just about the redistricting question. He's blocked progressive action on a number of fronts, and so we will dip our toe into that because we feel we have no choice. We are not, potted plants, and we have to respond, to the Democratic Party and help it get better.
So everybody knows Bill Ferguson is the president of the Maryland Senate, and Bobby LaPin is running against him in his district.
June 23rd primary.
One pathology of having too many groups bubbling all the time is the Montgomery County Climate Action. Montgomery County is extraordinary in that the county has a climate action plan. Look at it, and the climate action plan has 87 different items. When I see 87 items on a plan, it's not really a plan. My hypothesis about that was that whoever is supposed to rationalize that did not have the capacity, the political capacity, to bring it all together and say, these are the 3-4 things we were going to do.
You're comparing two different things. It's not like the group here, Indivisible Montgomery, and then a group down the street have competing ideas and we're drawing energy away from each other. We're more or less all united on, the front of resisting the Trump regime. And we may have different focus. And also, don't forget, like Chris said, multiple people have multiple memberships. And so they cross-pollinate and go back and forth. So I think you're comparing two different things, Sunil.
The big divide in environmentalism is between conservationists and fuel cycle people. I've now done several episodes looking at that problem, and it is really hard to get conservationists and fuel cycle people together to agree. What do you think are your coordination problems, or what do you think are the sort of failures of coordination from your point of view as grassroots organization?
There's not one cross Montgomery County email or Signal chat that I'm aware of.
If anybody would know, you would know, and I think that's the point, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Right, but you know what? That can be overcome, pretty easily. I mean, if we have something big that we want to make sure groups know about, we send those emails. We work through the Maryland Indivisible Coalition. We can work through them. That's a structure that exists now. The beauty of having small groups, many small agile groups, is that we don't wait for permission from each other to do something. Like the Citizens Bank action we're going to take. Citizens Bank is funding ICE, the two major private prison companies in the United States. They have
What do you mean
branches
funding? Like
loaning money to Core Civic and GeoCore, which are the primary private prison companies in the United States. They are the only bank that we're aware of. In 2019, a whole bunch of banks walked away from that business and said we don't want to be involved with it, but Citizens stayed.
Chris, you wrote the book on uniting people. What are the coordination problems?
The base tension here is that all the work that we've been talking about is all volunteer work, that people are taking time from their life to do this work. They're not being paid for it. That takes time away from family. It takes time away from hobbies, from sleep, sometimes even from work. And people have to decide how much time they want to give to these volunteer efforts. One of the reasons I stepped away is because it took too much time from my family. I talk at the beginning of the book of just the number of people who said they would help, run the website or run various committees, who stepped away within 2 months because it was too much work for them and everyone realized it was volunteer work and they could step away. You have to find people to run the organization who are willing to devote a certain amount of time to it.
By certain, you mean a lot.
Right. Depending on your level of engagement, sure. But then to get some higher level of coordination, you need someone to not only be engaged in their group, but then to be able to coordinate with these other groups who are in the area. And of course, all of those leaders have their own time pressures. There are just too many moving parts for like a centralized communications coordination hub. And so it falls to each of the groups to do their best. When I was running Indivisible Montgomery, I had one or two people who were point people for just communicating with various other groups to make sure that they knew. But there was nobody going out and looking for new groups that we might be able to pull into our network, because that takes a lot of time and effort. And still some things fell between the cracks. I knew all the various group leaders, and it would have been great if we could have gotten together for a beer, but that didn't happen. But we all knew what each other was going through. So if I accidentally left off one major group from something we were doing, there were no hard feelings there, because it's like, these things happen.
It reminds me of parenting. Give yourself grace.
Absolutely. Give yourself grace and expect a lot of things to fall through the cracks.
It's kind of touching. One way that many of us end our emails to each other was with the phrase, "Thank you for all you do." Because it's the recognition of the fact that this is very hard work. Yes, as Chris said, you may be doing this in lieu of taking care of a family member or some other pressing priority that you have. So you do what you can. Another angle and I don't know if we want to open up this can of worms, but as you can see, a lot of these groups are populated by older white people. Why? Because they have time and possibly resources. That is more a weakness than our disparities in our diffuse organizations.
But do you think that there are not groups that comprise of Black people or Latino people that are just not in your orbit? Or do you think that these groups are mainly white and old?
So I think those groups definitely are there. The NAACP is around and they predate Indivisible Montgomery by a century. One thing that we did early on is that I had tried to get people to reach out to those various groups, NAACP, CASA, other local groups. First of all, going back to the volunteer thing, people stopped doing it because they didn't have time. But also, once we did make contact, they were mostly cool to our wanting to work with them.
They're professionals, right? And so they are paid. Many of them are paid.
That's right. And there was also the sense that they had seen flash in the pan organizations before. And so it was essentially, come back when you're 10 years old and we will talk about, partnering. Nobody said that explicitly, but that was the message that we took from it. I kind of got that. Why do you want to invest in a group that's only going to be around for a couple of years, focused on their own pet issue, and then they're going to vanish? And what happens to the institutional work that you've put into it?
So did you go back after 10 years?
Well, that would be a question for D. I only was around for the first 4. But it was at that point where I kind of stepped back and, there was less tension about the whiteness of the group, because it was one of those things where we need to establish ourselves as an actual community partner before we can go out and try to work with these other groups. Like
10 years later, it doesn't matter.
No, it does matter.
So you're now established, you have your membership, right, and the membership is pretty diverse, and you're like, whatever. If CASA doesn't want to work with us, they're cool. And I've gotten the same sense from CASA actually.
Well, our membership is not diverse. Okay, that's why I brought this up to begin with. It's not diverse. That is, and I see that as a weakness for a group like Indivisible Montgomery. I can't speak about all the Indivisible chapters across Montgomery County, but I suspect from the ones I know, they share that characteristic: older, white retirees, who have time and some resources. But I think maybe for the immigrant solidarity work that can be done is that the attitude is at least within Indivisible Montgomery, is like to go to these other groups, CASA, MoCo, IRC, and just say, hey, just how can we help?
When you ask that, what do they say?
They say you need to go through our vetting process, and you need to come to our meetings, and you need to spend the time, which is right. We're just not gonna like helicopter in and like save the day. That's bullshit. We have to learn from them and let them tell us what they see and what their needs are, and we need to be trusted.
So you become a part of their group, essentially.
Yeah, an ally.
But if you're part of their group, then, obviously.
So we could go to their training and send our people as allies into work, say, neighborhood canvassing with them or collecting food with them. Trusted. Well, we would not be at the point where we would actually probably have like direct contact with an immigrant family that needs mutual aid. We would be like part of the last leg that might bring food to a distribution center, and then we back off. But I think that's okay for now. We need to work. That's the bottom line. Everybody needs to function productively. And if that's the best way right now, then that's the way it is.
Well, so that's what I was asking about when I was talking about coordination. There is an imperative for a organization to grow its own membership. And certainly those that are run by professionals, feel that compulsion even more urgently than perhaps Indivisible, which is volunteer-led. And that creates a certain dynamic that you're describing, that you can just, you can join from the margins, but you can't really be central. Essentially, you are all doing the work that you can, waiting for nookings to happen, essentially.
Yeah.
It's like, it really is that overarching movement that then will unify and coordinate.
The overall effort. Yeah.
Okay. What lies ahead?
The main problem right now is winning the midterms. That is the only thing that matters at the moment.
Speak to what you're doing to win the midterms.
There's another progressive group out there called Swing Left, who focus on elections. I think they're brilliant. They have come up with a strategy this year that they call Ground Truth. And the thesis of the strategy is that the Dems have historically done canvassing work wrong. It is the fact that the Dems have showed up too late. They are very transactional when you are at the door talking to a potential voter. And we're perceived as, just irrelevant. So what Ground Truth does, and it started way, way earlier in the cycle, it's already in full swing, is to talk to voters and just listen. It's a deep listening technique where you call voters in a particular district. You also are not limited to calling Democrats. You call independents, and you also call voters who may possibly have never voted, not voted in the last few cycles. And you just ask some key questions. How do you feel the country is going? What would you say to elected politicians? And so we've been working on those phone banks in the Virginia 2 district, which is Jen Kagan's district. And we have also pushed our members towards going toward Pennsylvania 10, Scott Perry's district that he continues to cling on to, and hopefully will be removed soon. Folks are coming back reporting having these amazing conversations. So what happens is that data gets aggregated by swing left and rolled up to the Democratic campaigns in those districts, so that hopefully the Democratic and the DNC has promised that it will take that data and operationalize that data in their approach to their final campaigns. So we hope so. So that's one thing we're doing.
So much of this is export oriented. It's from Maryland aimed at Virginia or at Pennsylvania.
Well, that's right. We have to see what's going on with Maryland 6 and what's going to happen with that. And like I said, we are dipping our toe a little bit into the primary work in Baltimore against Ferguson. But that's brand new for us because we have always exported. We've always exported our work in terms of elections out to Pennsylvania generally, or possibly Virginia.
Chris, in writing the book, did you think about how political, like overtly political or electoral you need to be versus how much sort of infrastructural you need to be?
Yeah, no, it was a real tension. How much do you talk about politics versus how much do you talk about, what I experienced? And I eventually settled on, I just had to tell my story and how it went, because over 4 years, you can't focus on one thing and only one thing. So sometimes, the work was very politically focused. It was getting people up to Capitol Hill. It was turning people out to do our export elections work, like Dee was indicating. There was a lot of that, but it was also, and there were a lot of headaches about building Indivisible Montgomery.
Right. So we're going to tell people to read your book, of course, but do you want to give like 4 bullet points for young organizers who are following in your footsteps?
First of all, collaboration and coordination is important. Do your homework to find out if there are other groups in the area that are doing the work that you want to do in the way that you want to do it, because it's easier to join a group and get involved through that group than try to establish your own. The second is, if you do go ahead and establish your own group, that you need to be prepared for, if it's a volunteer organization, for people to leave. People who you can depend on in your regular life, their friends, their colleagues, whatever. Be prepared for them to leave the work just because it becomes too much for them.
And don't take it personally, and have a numbers approach to this, right?
Absolutely. Don't take it personally. There's so much going on that you can't take it personally, because if you do, you'll burn out. The third point is, before you launch yourself into something like this, is to work some kind of plan, a rough sketch of when you're going to have time for yourself and for your family. Because it is very easy to devote every ounce of time that you have to this volunteer effort and to burn out very quickly.
Chris Pickett, good luck with the book. Dee Clarkin, good luck with the midterms.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Sunil. It's been great talking to you, and good luck to all of us with the midterms.
That's all for this episode of I Hate Politics, where we aim to stem the decline in local news by working with community voices. Don't forget to tune in to our Tuesday morning news analysis. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta. Music for this episode comes from Silver Spring rock musician J.D. Brayton, who goes by the stage name Mr. Tree Frog. The two songs we play in this episode are Halo and Troubled Sleep. You can find his music on Bandcamp. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email producer@ihbpod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
That's